Greetings, friends. You are watching Ruslan Belov's channel, and today we will analyze the situation in Ukraine in detail as of February 10, 2026. Many significant events have occurred over the past 24 hours, so let's move straight to the analysis without unnecessary introductions. It is worth starting today's review with one indicative statement, which in fact speaks volumes on its own. Today, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, announced that Colonel Valentin Manko has been relieved of his post as commander of the assault troops. In essence, this is all that is necessary to know about the results of the so-called Zaporizhia counteroffensive by the AFU, the start of which occurred roughly in mid-January. Moreover, this operation could well claim the title of the most unnoticeable and quiet counteroffensive during the entire conflict on the territory of Ukraine. By February 9th to 10th, reports began to appear that this counteroffensive is essentially coming to its conclusion, despite the fact that it began about a month ago. At the same time, throughout this entire period, neither the Ukrainian nor the Russian side published any statements, video materials, or detailed reports that would allow one to objectively trace the course of combat operations. Only now can we assess the outcome. And the outcome, judging by current information, lies in the fact that Ukrainian troops attempted to counterattack both north of the Zaporizhia salient and on the western flank. However, based on data as of the evening of February 10th, the Ukrainian side failed to achieve its stated goals. The only tangible result, seemingly, was yet another personnel reshuffle in the command. Now let's analyze the situation sequentially, starting with the northern direction and the corresponding cartographic changes. This is exactly how the map of combat operations looked back on February 9, 2026. Already today, some analysts began publishing information according to which, starting approximately from mid-January 2026 and relying on open-source data, the Ukrainian side managed to concentrate certain forces on the southern bank of the Vovcha River and begin advancing in a southern direction towards the settlements of Oleksivka, Vovcha, Aristopol, and a number of others. In the course of these combat operations, individual sources claimed that the listed settlements ostensibly returned under the control of the AFU, while other analysts designate this territory as a grey zone. We, in turn, adhere to a similar approach and also mark this section as a zone of uncertain control. At the same time, it is clearly visible that despite the rather noticeable visual recoloring on the map, not a single square kilometre along the main defence line, previously belonging to the AFU and now being the main defense line of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, was touched. First and foremost, we are talking about the line running through the settlements of Malinivka, Ternov, Stepov, Verbov, Vishneva, Yehorivka, Danilivka, and Ostapivske. This is a branched system of strongholds, and if one carefully analyzes the situation, it becomes clear that all the adjustments that various experts are making north of this line concern territories that were essentially in the grey zone before. The Ukrainian side failed to advance south of it. In essence, what is happening resembles more of an attempt to occupy the grey zone in anticipation of potentially larger-scale actions. However, as we can see, the offensive received no further development. We updated the map, designating part of the territories as being under AFU control and part as a grey zone. This offensive, which began roughly in mid-January, did not grow into anything greater. This was the first stage of the AFU's offensive actions. Apparently, it was in the nature of a diversionary maneuver, within the framework of which strikes were delivered from the directions of the settlements of Pokrovska and Velikomikhylivka towards the south. This stage ended with a rather remarkable event. The Ukrainian side, with the participation of American structures and companies, turned off the Starlink system in territories under the control of the Russian armed forces, as well as for unverified terminals. Likely, this contained a certain tactical calculation, since turning off Starlink could partially affect reconnaissance capabilities. Given that the main movement since mid-January was recorded from the northern direction, it was assumed that Russia would concentrate its main efforts on precisely this defense line, fearing a breakthrough under conditions of possible communication problems. However, further actions by the Ukrainian side unfolded on the western flank. The offensive began from the settlement of Staroukrainka in a northern direction, towards Ternovate. This was the second stage of the counteroffensive, and it was today that objective control footage began to appear, demonstrating the combat operations of this stage, which started after the Starlink shutdown. These video materials were published by pro-Russian sources. In them, it is clearly visible how operators of FPV drones of the Russian armed forces deliver strikes on Ukrainian equipment and columns attempting to break through the defense, enter Ternavate, land troops, disperse, and secure positions. A significant amount of equipment was hit, destroyed, or disabled. The Vostok, or East Group of Forces, publishes daily reports and statistics on AFU losses in this sector. Based on these video materials, several geolocation points were fixed. One of them is located in the northeastern part of the settlement of Predorozhne. Based on this data and subsequent cartographic corrections, a number of experts have fully attributed Predorozhne to AFU control. An episode of a strike on equipment moving along the central street of the settlement was also recorded. Most neutral, pro-Ukrainian and pro-Western analysts, relying on this video evidence, made full adjustments regarding both Predorozhne and Ternavate. However, it is important here to understand the initial task of the Ukrainian command. Ternavate is a key settlement on the western bank of the Haicha River. It is from this bridgehead that the Russian side plans further advancement towards Orikhiv and Zaporizhia. Accordingly, the priority task for the AFU assault units was not the immediate occupation of the center of Ternavate, but reaching its southeastern and southern outskirts with the aim of blocking the main transport arteries. The plan envisaged cutting off the roads leading to the central part, to the western quarters, and to the railway junction. Only after a complete blockade was a gradual advance deep into the settlement envisaged, block by block, micro-district by micro-district. Therefore, drawing final conclusions and making full cartographic adjustments based only on individual geolocations from the eastern part is incorrect, since the battles for Ternavate continue. At the moment, Russian units maintain a presence in the settlement, while the Ukrainian side is trying to exert pressure from the north and west, simultaneously holding the main supply routes. Nevertheless, relying on available video materials and expert assessments, we have also made our adjustments. In the current version of the map, it is visible that a significant part of Ternavate still remains a grey zone, while individual areas may be under the stable control of the AFU. In addition, one of the strikes was recorded in the area of the settlement of Pryluki on the road from Vovchansk. Changes were also noted in the area of Staroukrainka. However, despite all attempts at counterattacks and the counteroffensive itself, as of the evening of February 10th, the Ukrainian side has failed to reach key defensive lines. On the northern flank, this is the line between Ostapivske and Malinivka, and on the western flank, the line from Andriivka and Ostapivske along the Haicha River all the way to Huliaipol. The offensive, which began in mid-January, did not lead to reaching these fortified positions. Moreover, today the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation and the Vostok Group of Forces published a large amount of video material dedicated to the battles for the settlement of Zaliznichne. According to objective control footage, Russian units managed to advance significantly inside the settlement. Based on these videos, as well as numerous episodes of flags being raised in various parts of it, a full recoloring of Zaliznichne in favor of the Russian armed forces was carried out. With the loss of Zaliznichne, operational space opens up for the Russian army, and now units will begin a systematic advance to the west, towards Orikhiv. Moreover, the main strike will likely be delivered from the northeastern direction, which is considered the least prepared in terms of the defense of Orikhiv. In parallel, actions have intensified on the western Orikhiv sector. According to reports from pro-Russian analysts, Russian troops managed to secure positions on the southern outskirts of Novoandriivka, which is reflected on the map. In addition, units continue to advance through the fields east of Stepnohirsk in the direction of Buryakivka, and are also improving positions in the northern part of Primorske, advancing towards Mala Katerinivka. This sector deserves special attention because Mala Katerinivka has not only tactical but also serious psychological significance. It is effectively part of the Zaporizhia agglomeration. The start of combat operations for Mala Katerinivka can be viewed as the beginning of battles for Zaporizhia itself, despite the remaining distance. The further development of events in this direction remains in question, and we will continue to monitor it closely. It is obvious that the Ukrainian side does not intend to abandon counteroffensive actions. At the same time, it is important to understand that the goal of the Zaporizhia counteroffensive is not a radical turning point in the war. The main task of the Ukrainian command is improving positions along the contact line ahead of the Russian spring-summer campaign. According to data from Western and Ukrainian media, as well as information from the General Staff of Ukraine and Syrskyi himself, the Russian army is completing the preparation of two large groupings. Two directions of offensive are planned for them: southern, on the Zaporizhia sector of the front, and eastern, in the area of the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. It is reported that the formation of these groupings began back in the summer of 2025, meaning the preparation has been going on for 7 to 9 months already. Forces and units have been formed, and it is precisely with the aim of preventing them from realizing their assigned tasks by the end of 2026 that the Ukrainian side launched the current Zaporizhia counteroffensive. The Ukrainian side is attempting to regain control over this defense line, as well as restore the bridgehead along the Haichur River. The calculation here is quite clear: to force the Russian army to essentially start combat operations for these areas anew, and thereby drag it into protracted battles that could take from several weeks to several months. Speaking generally about the Zaporizhia offensive, the Ukrainian command currently has one key task in this direction. It consists of maximally slowing down the tempo of the Russian units' advance until December 2026, conditionally, at least to the designated yellow line. In the event that the Ukrainian side manages to hold the Russian advance within these limits until the end of 2026, actual control over the city of Zaporizhia could be preserved at least until the beginning of spring 2027, roughly until March, and possibly until April to May. It is for the sake of fulfilling this task that battles are currently continuing along the entire Zaporizhia front line, where Ukrainian units are trying to hold on at any cost. Next, we move to the Dobropilya direction, to the Dobropilya sector of the front. Here, certain changes have also been recorded, albeit not large-scale ones. According to data from various neutral cartographic services, units of the armed forces of Ukraine have finally abandoned the western outskirts of the settlement of Rodinske, while the Russian army was able to confidently secure positions along its perimeter. In addition, information is coming in about a significant improvement in the positions of Russian units in the area of the settlement of Zaporizhia. Similar adjustments are noted precisely in this sector of the front. The majority of these changes are based on data from neutral cartographers, pro-Russian sources, as well as on published video materials. At the current moment, we see that the settlement of Belitsky has effectively ended up in semi-encirclement. Russian units are flanking it from the southeastern and southwestern directions. At the same time, according to data from pro-Ukrainian cartographic resources, Russian forces had previously already reached the northern outskirts of Belitska from another sector as well. Thus, fierce battles are currently being waged for Belitske. However, extremely little information is still coming from this direction, which does not allow for drawing unequivocal conclusions about the current position of the sides. As for the Kostyantynivka sector of the front, practically complete silence is maintained here. There is no significant news or confirmed adjustments from this direction. The only thing that is regularly published is video materials showing FPV drone strikes on the forward positions of the AFU. However, it would be more correct to speak not of the front edge, but of a grey zone, since it is difficult to characterize the southern part of Kostyantynivka otherwise. This is a vast territory of uncertain control, where Russian sabotage groups may periodically enter. However, Ukrainian units operate here to a greater extent. At the same time, it is not a matter of securing positions, but rather of fire control over main logistical routes. The tactic of exhausting the AFU garrison in Kostyantynivka has either not yielded the expected effect yet, or the moment has not yet arrived when the Russian army will transition to a full-fledged general offensive with the aim of a final breakthrough and securing positions in the southern part of the city. A completely different picture is observed in the Sloviansk direction, where perhaps the greatest activity is currently recorded. Russian units are confidently advancing along the M03 highway in the area of Kryva Luka and in the direction of the settlement of Lyman. This is exactly how the front line has been changing in this sector over the past few days. Back on February 6th, the map looked different. By the end of February 7th, Russian units improved their positions in the area of Fedorivka Druha. Already on February 8th, an advance was noted in the area of large strongholds along the Minkivka, Privilia, Fedorivka Druha line. And on February 9th, information appeared about the collapsing of a large pocket between the settlements of Bondan, Zaliznianska, and Privilia. Today, neutral cartographic services report that combat operations are gradually approaching the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. Reaching this canal will effectively complete the battle for the first line of defense and will mean an advance of approximately 40 to 50% in the area of the second line of defense between the settlements of Dibrova, Fedorivka, and Nikiforivka. Thus, the Russian army is methodically reducing the distance to the settlement of Rai-Oleksandrivka. Rai-Oleksandrivka is a most important psychological and tactical frontier for both the Russian side and the armed forces of Ukraine. A breakthrough of this node will effectively mean the start of combat operations for Sloviansk itself. Rai-Oleksandrivka is a large and powerful AFU stronghold, which will be followed by the battle for the Sloviansk thermal power plant, and therefore a transition to the next phase of fighting. At the same time, a huge number of geolocations are recorded slightly to the east. It is in this sector that the highest density of artillery strikes and FPV drone attacks is noted. Local but important changes are taking place here. According to data from neutral cartographers, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to significantly improve their positions south of Zakitne and east of Kriva Luka. Information is also coming in that Ukrainian units are hurriedly withdrawing their forces towards Kolesniki and the remnants of the settlement of Riznikivka. With a high degree of probability, it can be assumed that in the near future, this small pocket will be liquidated. The front line will level out, and combat operations will unfold for the next network of strongholds. Pay attention, this sector is saturated with fortifications, many of which are located near large forest massifs to the west, through which, presumably, supply is carried out. It is precisely to this key area that the main battle in this direction is now gradually shifting. Slightly to the north, the first confirmed geolocations have appeared, testifying to the presence of Russian units along the entire eastern perimeter of the city of Lyman. These frames were published by the Ukrainian side. They recorded FPV drone strikes on Russian troop positions in the northeastern part of the city. Based on these video materials, the corresponding recoloring of the map is being performed. At the same time, a small pocket northeast of Lyman remains, which is still held by Ukrainian units. However, Russian forces are already actively working on this sector as well. In all likelihood, to avoid encirclement and the final collapsing of this sector, the Ukrainian side will soon be forced to begin withdrawing its units to the northern part of Lyman, if such a possibility still remains. Next, we move to the Kupiansk direction. Today, a significant number of geolocations are coming from here, part of which are recorded east of the Oskil River and run practically along the line of combat engagement. These video materials generally confirm the current configuration of the front that you see on the map. Also, video material from the northwestern part of Kupiansk was published, in which FPV drone strikes were recorded on sabotage groups of the armed forces of the Russian Federation that had penetrated this area and occupied positions. However, despite the fact that the video looks fresh from the point of view of publication, doubts arise regarding its real chronological correspondence to events. In connection with this, at the moment the map is not being adjusted until the date of filming is definitively clarified. Nevertheless, a number of cartographers, predominantly pro-Russian ones, are already making changes based on these frames, according to which Russian units have again broken through the AFU defense in the northern part of Kupiansk and are forming another semicircle of encirclement. Effectively, this repeats the scenario of combat operations observed in the summer and then in the late summer and early autumn of the Kupiansk campaign of 2025. If it is confirmed that these video materials are indeed current, then in the near future, the northwestern part of Kupiansk will again be colored red. This will become yet another signal that despite the Ukrainian side's attempts to counterattack in the Kupiansk direction, a turning point is brewing here. In such a case, the AFU will likely be forced to withdraw from Kupiansk to the west. towards Shevchenkov and further to positions that were held back in 2022. In the northern sectors, intensive combat operations continue in the area of the settlement of Vovchansk. Particular attention is now riveted to a large forest massif south of the settlement of Pervomaiske. It is from here that video materials are being published today by the Sever North Group of Forces. Recorded in these frames are massive strikes on said forest massif. The battles here are heavy in nature. The Ukrainian side has managed to gain a foothold in this area, and new episodes of objective control appear almost daily. With high probability, it can be expected that cartographic adjustments will also follow in this sector in the near future. That is all for now, friends. Thank you for staying with the channel, subscribe and support with likes. All the best to you, and until we meet again.